All right, so just want to start by introducing myself a little bit. Some of you probably don't know who I am, probably most of you. So I was going to just say really quickly, there's about 29 people. Okay. So if you want to have any questions or anything, you could probably just put them in the chat and I'll monitor it. Andy's also one of the room hosts and he's going to help, and a moderator, so he's going to help out with that too. But I'll be keeping an eye on the chat if there's anything. So today we're going to be covering Tableau visualizations for K-12 and kind of examples and uses. I'm also going to talk a little bit about how I ended up using Tableau and why we continue to use it for public data. So my name is Steve. I work at Riverside County Office of Education, where I automate, integrate, and visualize data, a lot of it for the purposes of monitoring and improvement. Have been working over 20 years with data, worked at Toyota Motor Sales for 11 years, Cal Poly Pomona, so that's higher ed, for 6 years, and RCOE, I've been there for 7 years now. I've done everything from continuous improvement, leading business reengineering, or business process reengineering, led team projects for improvement, facilitated professional development for TPS, TQM, all those kind of things. I've been a decision support analyst, report developer, QA team lead, ETL developer, and even an end-to-end data warehouse architect. So I've done quite a few things in my career stint. So let's talk a little bit about Tableau and kind of why you'd want to use it and what it is. It's a data visualization tool, and it's one of the greatest appeals of it, and most people will tell you, is that it's pretty. I mean, it's very visually appealing. It's dynamic and interactive. It handles pre-aggregated data very well, which is one of the reasons why I do use it for a lot of the data files that we use with the public data files that we put out on Tableau Public. It's fairly easy to learn if you're familiar with data tools, and even if you're not, it's pretty easy to pick up and do stuff with. Has a really large and helpful user community. If you look up, on Twitter, #DataFam, you'll find all sorts of users that have been using the product for many years. And the Tableau public version is free, and it's free to upload data. I think they give you a couple of gigabytes that you can throw up there. I've put up like large data sets, and I don't think I'm even close to hitting my maximum. So the paid version has a companion software called Tableau Prep, which is for data wrangling and integration and things like that. Not quite as powerful as something like Alteryx or NIME or something like that, but it gets the job done to get your data prepped and ready for reporting. One of the things Prep, like it's not necessarily included right into the Tableau Public, the free version. It's something you get when you pay for it. Power BI does have that kind of functionality built right into it. One of the disadvantages of Tableau is it can be pricey, some of the licensing, depending on your situation. I think if you're a very small organization, it's actually very inexpensive. But if you start scaling out, it can be a little pricey. So, and it's also not good for printed reports. So like multi-page paginated reports doesn't work quite as well with that. It really is for on-screen or maybe printing one-off kind of things. It is definitely better on laptops and desktops, something that's equipped with a touchpad or a mouse. So if you use it on anything smaller than even a tablet, it gets a little difficult to use. So it's better used on a tablet, or again, even better on a desktop or a laptop. So let me talk a little bit about the path I took that ended up that I used to get here and use Tableau, mainly Tableau Public. We actually don't even have, we have a server, but there's like 2 or 3 of us on it at RCOE. We don't really use it. We test things with it and things like that. When I'm putting reports on, I want to see what they're going to look like when we put it into public, but really we don't use it all that much. So I started off like in 2014, 2013, when LCFF came along. We had a long list of required indicators, and we had to disaggregate them by so many different student groups. And we really had no dashboard at all then, right? It was it was kind of the Wild West. One of the things we immediately recognized at our county office was that we didn't have consistent data definitions. Once our districts, started throwing data out there for their LCAPs, it was going to be the Wild West, and they were not going to be comparable to one another. And we didn't have a way to really display them. So luckily, we did have our data sharing agreements in place with our districts. So I started pulling all that data, into a mini data warehouse, right? And it was using, of course, Microsoft Access at the time. I didn't have access to SQL Server at the time. I was newer at RCOE, and with common definitions in place and all that set up and put into star schemas, I was actually able to put some visualizations together. And so, of course, for that, I used the mighty Excel, right? And this is like the first version of, I almost feel like the California school dashboard, right? It's I created this in 2014, so it's kind of crazy that it's been that long ago. But it was right at the end of 2014. I created this, having our data sharing agreements in place. We were able to produce something that was pretty cool. School Services of California advertised it and pushed it in their trainings. It was pretty neat that it was gaining traction. And if you look closely there, you can see that there are little spark lines. There's little color indicators. And in fact, if you look at this and you look at version 1 of the dashboard in their student group report, there's some similarities in the layout and kind of how it's set. I did talk to CD at one point, and we were having conversations. They were asking me how I did the tool and all that stuff. So I imagine they might have taken some cues. I did not get any royalties, sadly. But again, they were starting to kind of figure out how to lay out this tool. They no longer use the little pie, the colored pies. They've moved on to the gauge. So things have changed, and they've evolved over time too. While the color was great for stakeholders to just simplify it down to a color, the whole idea of status and change, for us trying to provide differentiated assistance and assist districts, the color ended up being an oversimplification. It was not as helpful when we were trying to help our districts, figure out, well, how do you improve and how do you get better when all you have is a color, right? You needed to be able to dig in behind it, and the data existed. It was in data files, but again, people throughout the state and throughout our county offices generally did not have access to it. So here is what we had: the fabulous 5x5s, formerly known as the rubric, when they started out, and people had to figure out okay, status and change. There was probably 20 webinars on trying to figure out what status and change meant. How do we explain it to stakeholders? And how did districts and school sites and student groups arrive at these different colors? So it was a little difficult to kind of navigate and figure out, and so I went and downloaded the data files, and I came up with the version 1 of the California School Dashboard using Tableau. And in there, it really allowed us, to visualize them and really tell the story kind of behind the color, right? It was more than just, oh, it's a green, it's a red, it's a this, it's a that. You actually got to see the nuance behind the number. And in this visualization, I basically used a Gantt chart, and then threw some arrows on it to tell you the directionality of change. And so you can see the length of the bar, or the Gantt chart bar, tells you how much change occurred between the current and the prior year. And then you can see that if the arrow is pointing in one direction or the other, to the right, it's growing, to the left, it's decreasing. And then, of course, if you can get to see where the current status is based on where the arrowhead is pointing towards. So that's kind of where it started. That's where I started using Tableau. And of course, now it feels like we're coming full circle, right? And lo and behold, we have no dashboard again, thanks to a pandemic. So what did I come up with? A new dashboard, on Tableau. I went ahead and I took pretty much all the data that exists out in CDE and compiled it into one dashboard, 8 million rows, and made it so that we could actually go in and do comparisons of our student groups, how they're performing versus the non-student group. Because I feel that if we're really going to talk about equity and if we're going to identify the gaps that exist, then we really need to understand what those differences are. So in this dashboard, you get to select any entity. You get to select the state, and you get all the counties. You select the counties, you get the district, you select the school, and you get, or you select the district, and then you get the schools below it. In addition, you get all the student groups for that entity. In addition, as you hover over, you get a nice little trend line. And for some indicators like A through G, I think we have 10, 11 years of data on there. So it goes as far back as we can. And also when you hover over, you get additional detail. And again, it's a great tool to see, the nuance, capture the nuance. And I'll be demonstrating it later in a live demo, and hopefully it doesn't bog down too much and go too slow, especially if you guys start going on there. So again, one of the great things about Tableau is the ability for it to connect to multitude of databases and file types and services. So you can connect to Google Sheets. In fact, Google Sheets is the one file connector you can use in Tableau Public and update on a daily basis. So if you update your Google Sheets file, it will update. You can put a schedule on it, but I think it's daily is the maximum. So you can't do it all like regularly, like hourly and things like that, or every few minutes. But if you have data that you want to be able to update every now and then, that is an option. Unfortunately, the data sets that I use for a lot of my visualizations, again, like this last one is like 8 million plus rows. So it's not going to happen on a Google Sheet. So I can't, and I'm not really updating it regularly anyway, so it's not a big deal. One of the connectors you do see there is Snowflake. Right now I'm working on actually setting up the data models that I have for all the information that we do put out in Tableau Public. My goal is to have it available in Snowflake. So that's something I'll be working on. And that way our county offices, districts, school sites, whoever is looking at this data can actually just pull it in, not have to not do the star schemas and the dimensionalization of it. They can just work with it. So that's something that's coming in the next month or so, hopefully, if I can get it done. So one of the cool things that you can do with Tableau is it's pretty flexible. And in fact, if you want to just do something as simple as a single chart, you can do that. In this example here, that's all we have is just a single chart. You also see that, I colored the text, so it's the same as this corresponding line. So it's easy to see, right? That the blue little information tag, the 2 percentage point increase from 2010 to 2018. When you read that, that that's connects to that blue line, that district line. And you can see how it compares to the county and then to the state. So that, again, you can create something very simple. The Tableau desktop software does have the ability to do a presentation mode. So you actually could interact and display information and use it that way. Same with Tableau Public, I believe. The only issue with Tableau Public is you cannot save to your desktop. You always have to save it to Tableau Public. And if you do that, you need to make sure that you're using, data that you're legally able to put up in Tableau Public and is not like student level data or information. It can be, it can be non-public, of course, but of course you have to make sure you have the permission to share that. You don't want to get in trouble with your district or your county office or whoever, owns that data. So again, with this one, I also created a collapsible container that you can see like on the top right, the hamburger menu. So all the filters are contained in that collapsible container. And from there, you can set your filters and then close it, and then you can display it. So again, it can work to do like presentations, works really well. You can also create full-on interactive dashboards. In the case of this one, this is the CASP dashboard that I created. This one has tons of information, and you can do so much analysis with this, even just in that one page. And in fact, this one I designed to be a one-pager, so you can purposely export it as a PDF and like show to someone. So again, the other one was more designed so you can output it to PowerPoint, and it's in that form factor. This one, again, it doesn't print well for multi-page reports, but if you just want to do a single one-off, it works pretty well. So this one is formatted, in a size that you can, push to a PDF, and you have a single page report and you can show it to someone. This one includes like, the big numbers for the headline, so you can really get an idea of what's going on here. Like right here, you see like, like 1.1 out of 1.7 million Hispanic kids, are not at standard for CASP, in math. So when you look at something like this, so only 28% are, at least in 2019. So when you want to be able to see that information like right at the top, right? And then below it, we have, our lollipop Gantt charts. And I looked it up. I did not invent that, sadly. I saw something as early as 2014, 2012 with it. So, but the lollipop itself tells you like the distance from standard. And then the bar tells you what that gap in performance is. So if you're looking at students with disabilities, the length of that bar tells you that, that's the gap between students without an IEP. So when you see that information, the longer that bar, you can see like what that inequity in the outcomes that's occurring. If the bar is gray, that means it's outperforming its complementary group. So again, this really tells a story as to what's happening. And then we also gives us the ability to see trend lines where you can see DFS, distance from standard. You can compare math and English language arts. In addition, you can see what's happening with the gaps, right, over time. And when you look at math, it actually has the gap has actually increased a little bit. For ELA, it's pretty much stayed flat, just maybe gone up a bit, when you're looking at and analyzing this data. And then what I find really interesting, and just looking at this chart here, you see how in math, like Hispanic students are getting progressively worse, DFS wise, the longer they stay in our schools, so, interesting to notice. But then that 11th grade score is not consistent with the one in ELA. So again, you can glean a lot of information from this one dashboard, and there's other tabs that you can view on this dashboard that allow you to drill into the data a little bit differently, but it's all kind of in the same format of, really pointing out the inequitable outcomes that are occurring. And this is one of the latest ones that I've done. And this is kind of full-on data application almost, because it's a planning tool that I created using the California School Dashboard data. But then it uses a lot of different features from Tableau. It uses a custom maps feature. So the 5x5 grid is a custom map, and each marker it uses coordinates, so it can like put them in the right place. And so that's how it gets mapped, onto it. Each 5x5 map gets swapped out depending on the indicator, and there's even different versions. So if you have a 3x5 grid, when you click on things, it's smart enough to know what those grids are, and it changes them dynamically. DAS rules, grade level spans for like suspension rates and things like that. And then it also uses animation, so you can actually look to see how your progress would be if you follow this targeting plan. You actually get to see like where you'd be if you didn't improve in the next year, and then in the following year, and so forth. So based on the parameters that you enter, and I'll go over this in a little bit. I'll be demoing it. So I'm going to get to the demo part of it, but okay, having some issues seeing. Okay, well, all right. Sorry, it's a little blurry, but we'll be going to. They're kind of small in this, but we will be looking at it as we do a demo. Any other questions? Or anybody have any questions? Let me see. If anybody wants to unmute themselves, I'll give you a second, and you can actually let me know if you have any questions.
Hi, Steve. Good morning. Thank you for sharing your process. This is so enlightening. And thank you for uploading the visuals onto Tableau Public. I have already pulled up many. Thank you for that. I'm wondering, can you share more about your process and your investment in professional learning so that's supporting kind of your growth with um, uh, perfecting use of Tableau? How was that process for you?
Um, I I think I've attended one class, but the thing is, I've been doing data warehousing and type of work for the last 20 years. So the reality is the tools are not all that different. I feel like the real effort goes into modeling that data up front, because the way I set it up in a star schema, it really makes it so that any tool I use can ingest this data and it's easy to use. So I always find that I actually spend about 80 to 90% of the time, sorry, prepping the data versus actually visualizing it. So hold on, let me get a drink of water. So I feel that that's where most of my work is. And but I think if you understand just like the basic concepts of dimensionalized data, like, and you put it in a star schema, it makes everything a little easier when you start rolling that data up. Right now, I actually I probably use the Tableau public like a couple of times a year. I do develop a few things internally, but I think really it's just a matter of getting in there and using it, and just start pulling in data sets from CDE and start, just messing around with it. See, set goals for yourself. I want to analyze this data in Tableau because I want to see, certain things together, or I want to see a correlation between certain students and student groups, and I want to see how students perform if they have so many suspensions versus what their CAS scores are and things like that. I mean, you can start, just think of things that you want to do with it, and then find a way. I mean, I think my email is at the end of this, and you can always shoot me an email, and I'm on Twitter and all these other things, so you can find me there if you have questions. But really, it really is a matter of getting in there and doing it. I have been doing it for a long time, and I've seen tools come and go. I mean, I started off using like Brio interactive reports, which is, I don't even think it exists anymore. It got bought out by Hyperion and then a bunch of other companies. Okay, Jim has his hand up as well. Okay.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I didn't.
No, it's okay.
Are you using Tableau? So Tableau, you're using it as an analyst, right? You're analyzing Tableau or you're analyzing data with Tableau. Do you ever get requests to say, hey, build me this interactive chart and publish it to a website so now other people can play with the data?
Well, what do you mean play with the data? With the
like they want to slide the sliders and they want to, do all the little analysis?
Yeah, and I'm going to be going over that. All this is
okay.
All the visualizations that I'm showing are in Tableau Public, and they're available to the public. And I'm going to be demoing that, but I just want to make sure I answer any questions before we get started. But yeah, but again, I'll just say in terms of professional development, I've just been doing this so long. Like I said, it's been over 20 years of me working as a data analyst, as a doing ETL work, doing data warehouse work. So I mean, when people ask me like, oh, show me how you did this, or how did you learn that? And I'm like, well, I kind of learned it over 20 plus years. It's kind of, and I'll ask people like, what are you looking specifically to learn, and what are you looking to specifically do? And I can probably point you in a better direction. Like I said, for me, it's just been so many years of doing this. And so, I kind of ended up with collecting all this knowledge over time, just because I've worked in higher ed, doing, data warehouse work. I've worked here. I've worked at, Toyota Motor Sales. I was a business analyst. I was a QA team lead there for data warehouse projects. So it's just something I've done for so long that it is very second nature in a way. And every time that Tableau does come out with new features like the mappings and things like that, I try to figure out and take advantage of those, see how we can use them so that we can display the data in a way that makes sense for the users. And again, I guess that's the other thing. I was a business analyst, so really understanding the needs of the users and what people are trying to do with that data is always the starting point, right? I mean, no matter how good a dashboard it is in terms of how pretty it looks or whatever, if it's not meeting the needs of the user, it's not going to do anything. Planning on providing PD for anyone that is interested. Actually, this is a conversation I was having a couple of days ago in my unit meeting, but I am thinking about opening up kind of office hours for data visualizations and integrations in the future. So I don't know if that's going to be open to beyond our county office yet or not, but you could always ask me if you have like quick questions I can answer. I do answer questions. If it's something simple, I will answer questions or I will point you in the right direction. So yes, if you do have any questions, send me a direct message on Twitter, send me an email, whatever, and I will do my best to answer it, at least point you in the right direction. So let's get to sharing the screens and kind of going through it, because I know it was small. So let's do the screen share thing. And where are you? I'm trying to move my chat window so that there we go. All right, so let's start with the kind of the report that started it all, kind of, and I'm refreshing it because sometimes it gets a little wonky if I don't. Again, and showing this, you were asking Jim about the sliders and everything here. This is Tableau Public. You can go in here, you can change, you can change the different values, select multiple things here. If you want right now set to English language arts, we can change it to math and chronic absenteeism, whatever. There's also, I created this little, it's kind of an interactive filter, but it tells you like how many of these entities, are green, yellow, orange, and you can actually even just say, I want to look at all my blues. You click on them and it actually does highlight them. Yeah, I can actually post that link in the chat. So here. Let me post that first. Go. So there's the link. That one has everything. So and I was gonna put that on later, but so anyways, in this one, it's the California School Dashboard. And again, the cool thing when you look at this, you see the nuance behind it. Remember when I said the story behind the color? You see some really interesting stuff just on this screen. You see that, there's oranges that are performing better than yellow, greens that are performing better than blue colors. So you see, all these things going on, and you see, the nuance behind that color, right? So again, right, we have like oranges higher than yellows, yellows higher than greens, and all these little nuances, right? Because I figure, well, the reality is if my kid was in a school, even if they were a yellow school, I'd want to be at the highest level yellow versus sometimes, a green that might be a little lower. So, okay. So one of the things is just that, right? You want to be able to see that nuance. So I think one of the cool things is this district by priority report, which basically allows you to select any entity, and let's see, I'll select a different one. Let's select this one here. And when we select this, we get, like almost like that first needs assessment tool I created. It has, all our student groups overhead, and then we have all our indicators by priority. And the cool thing about this, it's really like allows you to really move through this report quickly. Now it tells you what direction it's going in, but let's say I want to just see my Hispanic students. I click on them, I immediately see how that particular district is performing, but then I get to see all the schools below it and see which ones are performing, how they're performing for, for the Hispanic students for that indicator. And again, this is a quick way to really see your data, right? I mean, you can just get through it pretty quickly. And even here, let me see. I like looking at things like this, right? It says that there was no change, right? But of course, that's at the district level. But if you look at what's going on at every school site, that's not the same as there was no change. And I really believe that if we're going to make a difference and we're going to improve, then we need to start looking at down to the school sites and to the school student groups. Question about how I use this data. Well, no, all this, I do not use the files directly as they come from CDE. And that's what I was mentioning earlier about putting all these up on Snowflake. to make them accessible. And for those who don't know what Snowflake is like a cloud data warehouse platform. California is also using them for their COVID data. They're putting out their data sets on there, and you're able to go in and download all that data, and it's just a database. So it's just SQL. So you can pull all the data. So I'm hoping I can have all these models that I've spent time building already and make them available to anybody, in California or the world. There is some processing that I do. And yeah, that's kind of the whole point, is to put the layouts out there. You could actually just use the same files. But I do, again, I put them all in star schemas, so they're dimensionalized that way. And I don't change any values and things like that, but I do processing for them. So like, even like these, I put them on a, all these indicators come in separate files from the state, from CDE, but actually put them all together. So it's just one long continuous file. So when you're reading it, you can select things a lot easier. There are certain points in time when you'll want slightly wider files, depending on if you're doing correlation analysis. But by putting it in a dimensionalized format, it actually allows you to have multiple fact tables and things like that. So, and I think when we put it out there, I'll have documentation for that. But again, like some of these reports, they do allow you to just go in and see, the data in multiple ways. So here, I'm gonna now go to, okay, it's reloading. This is the latest report. And again, this is the one I was showing that, it shows your student group and then the equity, like the equity gaps that exist. So if we're going to look at, we'll do English learners. So if we look at our English learners, we actually see how they're performing over time on the trend line. And we see there's been improvement across the state. This is graduation rate. So you can see the adjustment that was made in, 2017 with the adjusted cohort grad rate. Everybody went down a little bit. However, you see, like, even for going down, English learners got hit a little harder than non-English learners when that change occurred. And you can see it on the trend line. So one of the nice things is, if I'm looking across the state, right now I get a state view up on top with all their student groups. But as soon as I click on English learners or any other student group, the bottom will change. And you'll see, like, now we can see all the different counties. You can actually see how they look for that particular student group, in this case, English learners. So now, again, you can say, well, I want to see where Riverside County is. We're right here. And we can actually see a trend line for Riverside County or any other county we want to visualize. And then we get a little additional details there. So this is a good tool for doing that. You can select any entity. So if I select a school district, in fact, I put the large districts here. For some reason, that's dropped down. When you do it online, it doesn't show every single, even when you type stuff in, it doesn't show everything. So I put Fresno Unified, Long Beach, LA, San Diego, San Francisco, and Oakland up here, just to make it easier to find. So, but the rest are in alpha, and you can type in anything. So, I'll put in my kid's old school district. And if I hit go, I get to see, oops. Oh, yeah, it's not going to work because it's not a. So let's change that, and let's change the year, because there was no CASP in 2020. But here we go. We have data for this particular district where my kids went, and you can see, like, what's happening with them, and you can see how they're doing, and how they're performing. So again, you can select anything. And again, if you select a school, you'll just get that one school, and the charters are included. So I know a lot of times they get excluded in reporting somehow. But if you just select a single charter school, you'll get that charter school. So any other questions so far? All right. So this last demo that I'm going to do is the target setting tool. And again, this one has some, I'll say pretty cool features that I've been using. And what happens with this one is, let's say I'm planning targets for my LCAP or SIPSA. And I know it's kind of weird this year because we didn't have a dashboard. And then, we didn't have a whole lot of data. But in the prior years with this, what I was able to do is, if we were planning, we can just say, hey, I'm in this particular district, and I want to see if I can improve over how many years do I want to set up my plan for, and what color do I want to improve to? And so in this case, let's say I'm already green, so I want to improve to blue in the next 3 years. It sets your progress. It tells you how many students you have, tells you how many students you need to improve by each year to meet your target, and what that yearly changes and percentage rate. So let's say you want to hit that target of being blue in 3 years. You're going to have to graduate an additional 9 students every year, year over year, to get to that target. And again, then you have the ability to play this, and you can actually see the movement where it goes. Like if you made 0 progress, you'd actually regress to yellow. Year 1, you could be in green. Second year, you'd be in green. And then year 3, you'd move to blue. So again, using the animations, it kind of tells you, what path you're going to take, to get there. And again, it's just something that kind of lets you see what your path is going to see. And when you set your targets, when you click different things, like, so if I click an alternative school, you'll see that this changes because of the size of the student group. It changes to 3x5, and you see it there. It automatically, using the DAS rules or the DAS rubric, or 5x5 or 3x5 in this case. So again, you're able to set all these targets and be able to plan accordingly. And if you want to say, I want to be, I'm red and I want to be, green in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, it'll tell you what paths you're going to be taking to get there. So again, these are some of the different tools I've created. All these are accessible to anyone. They are public data. So I have put them out there for everyone to use. Are there any questions? I know I was asked about the tables and stuff, and I am going to make those available, hopefully. And let me see if there's anything else in the chat. I think that was it. So yeah, I'll let you guys know, or I'm trying to see where, and this is one of the discussions we've been having with, how do we kind of create a some kind of Slack channel or something. That way we can have a place where people can ask questions about, data visualizations, data integrations, and things like that. So, we do have networks within our county for Java likes. We also have like COE, some COE data visualization groups. So I don't know, Tracy, where you are, if you're in a county office or in a district, but I think at some point we need to have some maybe larger groups so that people can learn and ask questions. So yeah, so I think that's probably the future right there. Any other questions? Anybody want to unmute? Because we still have 7 minutes, so ask me anything.
I got a question.
All right.
All right. I feel like where I'm at, I understand data. I understand databases, queries, all that stuff. And I think Tableau is so far away from me, I can't even seem to reach it. I feel like there's a chasm that I have to get across. Where would you say I should go to? Just start Googling Tableau and keep on hitting at it? Start with the desktop environment?
Just download the public. It's free. I would say start there. The Tableau public is part of it, is the website that I showed you right now, where you can actually upload stuff, but it's also the exact same tool as the paid version. Again, the only difference is you cannot save to your desktop. You have to save it to the public cloud.
I see.
So as long as you're using a public data set or just some kind of, made up data set, or, just find something there's so much information online that you can find too. There's census data, there's all sorts of stuff you can find online to just play around with, or you want to just use education data. Download something and just start playing with it. There are plenty of, again, if you're on Twitter, go to, just do, like hashtag. On Twitter, if you do hashtag datafam, you'll get like all these people that are using Tableau. And like I said, their community is probably one of the best when it comes to software. They're really, really engaged and hardcore. I went to the conference, back when conferences in person were a thing, and there was like 16,000 people, and they're rabid fans, and they're all willing to help. Yeah, there probably is stuff on Udemy, Coursera, but even then, there's a lot of people that just are willing. There's blogs. There's a bunch of videos you can find on YouTube. I've not paid for a course, on my own at least to learn Tableau. I feel like it's very intuitive, and if you go online, you could find the solution usually with other users and within that community. And they're in the Tableau forums and user groups that are, like the from Tableau and now Salesforce, because they bought them out. Like they have a lot of information. And again, like if you want to look up anything, you can pretty much find it. Just do a quick search and you'll get it.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, okay. Can you show the back end of Tableau or perform a quick load of data? Oh, well, I did not plan that. And let me see.
That's hilarious.
I know. I'm like, oh, well, I was going to say, I did not plan that. And really the process is not difficult, but let me see if I can actually pull up. What I'll do is just kind of show you what that looks like in the data modeling piece on the back end. So let me see. Hopefully it doesn't take too long to load because I got Zoom and everything running. In fact, let me see. Actually, I was going to do there. So at least you can find my info there while I'm talking. No, I do not want to update right now. Let's okay, so let me show you this. What I'll do is I'll just show you kind of like what the data source looks like on the. Okay, let me see if I can make this smaller because this is. Oops, actually, hold on. I shut off my database because I did not want to use up resources. So let me start the database. Okay, there we go. Now I can do it. Okay. Let me make this smaller so it's not ridiculously huge. There we go. Let's do things live and break things live. Okay. So this is what the screen looks like when you load data. These are all the tons of connectors that you get. And I showed you that exhaustive list, and you can always create your own. With the SDK, you can provide your own. If you know how to code, you can create your own connector. Now, this is essentially kind of the data set I use for a lot of my stuff. This is the non-dashboard one. And you see I have, entities on one side, and then I have some fact tables, everything. I tend to put everything into a view. It makes life easier in the long term, because if I need to change something, Tableau is not as, it's not easy to change things on Tableau when it comes to changing the underlying data model. I mean, you can change the data model and stuff. If you add stuff, it's easy. If you take things out or change names or do stuff, it doesn't respond very well. So, and this is a practice I learned from data warehousing. Even if it's a materialized view or whatever, always report against the view, because you could always change that underlying view and it makes things a little easier. And you can rename things as needed. So that's probably one of my first recommendations where you're using Tableau or any other tool. If possible, if you're going to do a dimensionalized model, report from a view. So that's my tip. So like when we look at this here, this is essentially the data model. We have a fact table that has all my information there. And it has everything for our, every indicator exists in here. So, and then we have, like I said, it's a star schema. So we have our entity views, which is all our schools. We have our metrics, which tells you like what it is, right? Like if it's a, ELA, math, whatever, and there's information that goes along with. Yeah. So, and then I have like our student groups, our subgroup view, and then we have our year view. So like multiple years are displayed in there. And so again, all these dimensions, all they are is the way you view the fact table data. So if you do a star schema, if you're like, here's your number of students, your percentages, everything. And this is how you summarize them or how you slice the data, by school, by indicator or metric, by student group, and then by year. So, and that's kind of essentially what a star schema is. You have a fact table that has all your numerics, and then the dimensions are ways to describe that. And coming from data warehousing world, that's kind of how I set everything up. Again, it's just easier, it makes everything easier to roll up. If you do a more complex model, you can add multiple fact tables, not in this particular view. This is the old way of doing things in Tableau for views, but now you can actually almost create like mini views within here. And now you can add more data. So if I want to add a different element, you can add one, and you see it creates the little link. The cool thing about their new data model feature is that you can add like different levels of aggregation, which makes it nice if you have some data that's student level data, and then you have some pre-aggregated data that's kind of public data. So as long as you can join them by school or student group, you could do that. So anyway, that's the gist. And I know we're out of time, so I'll be here for a minute if anybody has a quick question, but I know you guys got to move on to your next things. And so any takers? Okay. Find me, DM me, send me a message. My email's there. Send me an email. And yeah, I look forward to hearing from you guys if you have any questions or comments. And you can find me in the different rooms of the conference as well.